Welcome to the This Week I'm Into podcast, and this week I'm into Jiu Jitsu. I'm your co-host, Pete Tyler. Later on the episode, we're having Paul's friend from high school, Fred Chien, join us to talk about his passion with Jiu Jitsu. But right now, I'm with my friend and co-host, Paul Imberguglio. Paul, how are you doing?
Hans, I'm unarmed.
Elaborate? Jarvis, elaborate.
I don't know, that was awful. I'm doing great today, Hansi.
Okay. Are you feeling okay?
I slept really poorly last night. We're dog sitting, and the dog was hanging out in our bed, just roaming around all night.
Well, okay, fair enough. Well, while we grapple this topic, let's...
Fuck, just let me use that.
Cut it.
Edit it in. Hans. Just let me take that.
Okay. Paul, I have a scene to set for you. Are you ready?
Wait, I'm taking your comment. Let's grab
No way.
Yep, it's done. I already did it. I said the words.
Oh my gosh. All right. Fine. Okay, well, I have a scene to set. Are you ready for the scene? Okay, here's the scene, Paul. All right. You find yourself at your local bar, right? Local dive bar. You're hanging out. You got some friends around you. You grab a drink from the bar. A guy bumps into you and you spill your drink. Ah, shoot. Ah, gosh. All over the bar, you grab some napkins, you wipe it up. You order another drink. Like, shoot. You don't even see where the guy went. You grab the other drink and all of a sudden, boom! You get hit again. And you spill your drink again. What is happening? You turn around. The guy is staring at you. He says, "You, me, let's fight." He says, "Take it outside." This guy was spilling your drink on purpose, and he is ready to fight you, Paul.
What did I do?
I'm not sure, but you definitely pissed him off. You go outside. You guys are in the street. You got a ring of people around you saying, "Fight, fight, fight, fight." Paul, how confident are you if you suddenly found yourself in this self-defense situation that your current or possibly lack of current skills would help you? What is your strategy?
Okay, I pride myself with never having been punched in the face. Don't really want that to start. So
I'm with you there.
I'm hoping that running is an option.
Wait, so you're telling me there's a ring of people around you just cheering, "Fight, fight, fight, fight," and you're like,
hopefully,
I got a tip.
If you were there and you didn't open up a path for me, our friendship would be on the rocks. But anyways, I did karate as a kid. Do I think, if this guy is like The Rock and he's standing there next to me, my odds are pretty slim. If it's someone who's like of a similar size to me, my odds are also probably pretty slim, but at least I've done karate before.
All right, Paul, the Karate Kid. I can see you getting ready to fight and then turning around and dashing out of the circle. I'll clear way for you.
I'll throw the sand that I keep in my pocket and then book it. As we've established in other episodes, I'm pretty dirty.
Have we ever established you do always carry pocket sand with you?
Yeah.
You never know when you're going to need it.
That's why I've never been punched in the face, because they can't see me.
I'm with you, Paul. I do not want to be punched in the face ever. That is certainly not on my bucket list. So maybe I would also dash. Maybe we're a podcast of cowards, but or maybe we'll learn how to fight today.
Well, I don't think you're really learning how to fight. I'm sure it doesn't seem, most martial arts that I've either been done or seen tend to not make me think that you're focused on like winning a fight in terms of like strength. A lot of them are more like subduing or like defense, things like that.
That's a fair
Hopefully,
point.
at the very least, you're not an aggressor like in your situation.
I think, so we can get into it, but I think jiu-jitsu is on the spectrum of martial arts. It's definitely more towards the not violent, more like aggressive winning side. When like we can get into it, but I've done other forms of martial arts that are like kind of almost completely what you're describing, which is like completely defensive. So let's dive into it. Yeah. Do you want to explain from your perspective what jiu-jitsu is?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely probably some more nuance than I'm able to know about, but it's essentially unarmed, like, close combat. I think it's a lot of focus on either defensive or I guess it could be offensive. I'm not entirely sure, but it's to like subdue your opponent. So it's not about like punching like maybe like boxing is, or it's more
Right.
about like grappling and subduing your opponent.
Yeah, I think that's really well put, Paul. From all the research I was doing, it seems like the grappling on the ground is one of the most important parts of jujitsu, and so there's a bunch of like different moves and stuff you can do to get your opponent into grapple on the ground, get him into like a submissive position, and then try to get him basically to tap out. That's how you win a bout of jujitsu. So I think that's really well put. Do you have any experience with jujitsu, or I'll go ahead and open it up to martial arts in general?
Yeah. No, I've never done jujitsu. I actually hadn't heard about it until somewhat recently. I don't know if it's becoming more popular as like the form of jujitsu you see in like your local area. When I was growing up, I did karate for probably, I don't know, quite a while actually, probably like 5-6 years maybe. And I really liked that. It wasn't as much of the grappling. It was more just kind of like, I don't even know how you put it, just like form fighting or something, unarmed fighting.
Yeah.
But I think those were good. It was definitely like something that I think as a kid, it was probably good. My parents probably put me in it for like one for a way of exercise. But I think there's a lot of focus on like discipline or like being like very like, also safety, right? People like take it kind of as like a self-defense kind of class. So there was a lot of good reasons to take it. I mean, I highly recommend doing martial arts if you've never done it before, or if you're like looking for something to exercise. But that's kind of what I haven't continued it since, but it was really great as a kid.
So what aspects of it did you enjoy the most?
So I used to go to competitions.
Oh, okay,
and
cool.
So in that, I apologize, I can't remember the names of it anymore, but there was one where it was kind of like a sequence of moves you had to learn, and you can kind of like imagine it like, just like a choreographed, I don't want to call it dance, but a choreographed like set of moves.
Sure.
That like you can compete in, and kind of you score based off of like the technicality of your set. But then there was also like sparring, and so that was really fun. Eventually, and I don't know if this was part of karate, but eventually I got to the point where they allowed me to join the class that like you had this big pole, like a wood stick, and you basically learn like a new set of moves, but that like utilize this stick as part of the fighting. So that was fun. I think it was honestly just like a really, like as a kid, it was a really fun way because I made a lot of friends in the class.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like a good way to like make friends. Like it was a good way to get a lot of like energy out in terms of like being able to spar, or like, I mean, probably not as fun, but like doing push-ups and sit-ups.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love the competition aspect of it too. Did you ever chop like a wood plank in half?
No, I don't know which martial art that is. That's not karate.
That wasn't karate? Okay. Wow, we have a lot to learn, huh?
No, that did always look fun. I do still think that those look fake, even though I've watched a lot of videos and I'm sure it's not actually fake.
No, it's not fake. It's not fake.
I mean, you're telling me that I could punch a cinder block. I'm like, Hans, if I smash my desk right now, I would probably hurt my palm. There's no way these people are full punching cinder blocks, right? Like, I can't believe it.
I don't know. It's
like, what's that guy? Like the finger punch that goes like, wow.
Oh, what is that? Like 2-finger punch or 1-finger punch? I can't remember.
Yeah.
You can absolutely throw your opponent onto the ground with just 2 fingers. Paul, I never did competitions, but I did do a martial art growing up too for probably 5 years. I did Aikido, if you ever heard of that one.
Oh.
So that one was very much what you were talking about, which was like pretty much very, very defensive. And it was all about redirecting your opponent's movements. So if they would like take a punch at you, you would use their momentum to like throw them off balance. I never did. There was no like competitions with that, at least where I went. But I did really enjoy it. And same thing you were talking about. I think it was a lot about like, gave you discipline, gave you something to work for as you kind of like worked up the belts, as you were getting better and better. I think I got up to like an orange belt with 2 stripes, I think is what we did. It was like every belt you'd get a piece of black electrical tape when you got to the next level. So you get a white belt, then you get a white belt with a stripe, white belt with 2 stripes, and then I think after that was yellow belt, I believe, and then yellow belt with 1 stripe, and so on and so on. So I think I got up to orange with 2 stripes. But at one point, as things with sports and school were getting more and more serious, I had to make the decision of, do I keep doing Aikido or do I take soccer a little more seriously? And I ended up going with soccer. So I had to stop Aikido, but I did love it. So shout out Aikido. Paul, can I give you a little background about how Jiu Jitsu came to be?
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you interested in that? Okay. So, Jiu Jitsu is a martial art like you were talking about. It does have its origins in Japan, and it is largely a grappling system. So, it's kind of like we were talking about. It's a lot about the ground movements, the grapple system with your opponent. It was originally a battlefield grappling system for samurai. Eventually, this kind of technique was brought by a Japanese master over to Brazil, and they were founding dojos in Brazil, so that jiu-jitsu from Japan eventually came Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So that's probably something you've heard of before, right? Like Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Yeah, so
and that's actually what Fred does, is Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Right, gotcha. Okay, so Brazilian jiu-jitsu was kind of where jiu-jitsu really flourished. So when it was brought from Japan to Brazil, that's where it really caught fire and started gaining popularity. But the biggest part about jiu-jitsu, like in its kind of a reputation as a legitimate fighting style, comes from very original UFC, Ultimate
Fighting Championship, maybe?
Championship, thank you. Yeah, I don't know why that was so hard for me to think of. It's like, but yeah, so like the very first UFC, the idea basically was that you'd have a ton of different fighting styles. So you'd have someone who did karate and Brazilian jiu-jitsu and a boxer and a wrestler, and you just go and match them together and see like what fighting technique is the best technique, So that was the idea of the very first UFC, and kind of like basically no rules, right? So this was the true test of what is the best fighting style on earth. And it turns out from that first competition that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was not super well known, but there was a fighter who practiced that technique, and they ended up winning the very first UFC championship fight.
Oh.
So that's where it kind of cemented itself as like a very legitimate fighting style. And it's from that it gained immense popularity until today, where you can see it's completely grown. Definitely not just in Brazil anymore. Now it's all around the US. It's a core component of the UFC. So you can see that its popularity has completely caught fire.
That's super cool. That's probably why it became more popular. I don't know when UFC started, but I hadn't heard about it.
Because you see like people practicing different kind of fighting styles and stuff online, and then you're kind of wondering like, if this person was in a real fight, like would that actually come in handy at all?
Yeah, exactly. To your point, right? Like my karate, they always talked about like basic blocks, right? Like, you have like, you kind of like cut your arm up to like knock a punch away, right? Or down to knock a punch away. But I'm like, in reality, would I just get punched in the face while I was doing this?
Yeah, probably. So apparently
it's like the Karate Kid, like,
wax on, wax off.
Wax on, wax off, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's literally like the paint thing where he goes like, whoa. And I'm like, it's the exact same idea, but I just don't know if it would work. Right.
I like that scene in Karate Kid is so freaking far-fetched. It's hilarious. Such a good scene, but like the wax on, wax off, and he's like, come on, Mr. Miyagi, like, I don't want to do this anymore, like,
teach me how to catch a fly with chopsticks.
It's not helping me with karate. And then Mr. Miyagi starts throwing punches, and he's like, whoa, like, wax on, wax off, like, oh, I can block everything, like, what's going on? I'm amazing now. I always thought that was so goofy, but such a great scene. Anyway, Paul, I'm a little off topic here. That's enough, Karate Kid. But I have a little game to play, Paul. As I was researching jiu-jitsu, a lot of different fighting moves came up. Different moves you can use to kind of trap your opponent or escape a grapple from your opponent.
What are the funniest ones?
So I was going to ask you, some of them have very interesting names. So I'm going to bring back a classic game. One of these moves is real. One of them is something I just made up.
Okay.
You have to tell me which is which. Sound okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Not good at this game.
Last time I think you went half correct on the cartoons. Is it real or not?
I just want to say that Hans picks funny ones for the fake ones, and that's what I pick. So let's put that out there now.
All right, ready? One of these is a real jiu-jitsu move. One of them I just made up. First round. Which of these is real? The arm bar or the lumbar?
Which support do I want? Let's just do the arm bar.
You are correct. The arm bar is a real jiu-jitsu move. The lumbar is your lower back. Okay, which of these is real? Which of them did I just make up? The triangle choke or the square plunge?
Ooh, the square plunge.
The square plunge is in fact something I just made up.
I don't know what that would be, but I
was imagining
hoping that you
like
have a description of it.
Oh, I was imagining like a WWE when you RKO someone, like grab them by the neck and fall down together.
Oh, I thought you were like gonna hit them with a chair.
Oh, that works too. That's a square plunge. Okay, ready, Paul? One of these is real. One I just made up. Omoplata or yakitori?
It's not. I know what yakitori is, Hans.
All right. I couldn't get away with that one, huh?
I think that would be embarrassing if I had gotten that one wrong.
All right, omoplata is a real move. Yakitori is grilled chicken.
Of course I know what grilled chicken is.
Okay, ready? Sheer swipe or scissor sweep?
Oh, sweep. It's the sweep one.
Oh, it's definitely the sweep one. Congratulations, Paul.
Sweep the leg. Sweep the leg.
There you go. All bringing up Karate Kid again. Yes, the scissor sweep is in fact a real move. All right, last one, Paul. I just want you to tell me. I got one move for you. Is this a real move or is this something I just made up? This one's called the rear naked choke.
That sounds like a real move.
It is a real move. I just thought it was really goofy. But no, it's not goofy. It's actually a legitimate move. The rear naked choke.
You just thought it was funny because they were naked.
Yeah, I did. All right. Maybe we can have Fred walk us through
demonstrate that moves. One for us. We'll get that one on video.
All right, Paul. I got a couple fun facts for you, and then we can bring Fred on. Sound okay. Good?
Yeah, Ian. Hans's fun fact. Hans's fun fact. Fun facts with Hans.
Thank you very much. Paul, fun fact number 1. The term jiu-jitsu translates to gentle art. So ju means gentleness and jitsu means art. So when you think about it, jiu-jitsu as a fighting style, it's kind of it's an art form, right? Beautiful movements. Beautiful.
That's beautiful.
Which I think actually, I mean, it's called martial arts, right? Like, I mean, I think there is a component of artistry to all of these different kinds of fighting techniques. So,
oh, for sure.
I don't know. Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting breakdown. Paul, achieving the highest honor in jiu-jitsu, the black belt, can take anywhere between 8 to 13 years. So that's quite a bit of discipline, don't you think?
Yeah, that makes sense. But, you know, they say like 10,000 hours to become like a master at something. Maybe you can do that in 10
good point. Years. Yep. So if you put in 10 years, you can, become a jiu-jitsu black belt, which I think is a master. But I think even black belt has levels. But...
yeah, they always add more levels, right? You can be SSS tier or something.
That's right. I want to give a shout out to the place I got these facts from. It's called smaa-budo-ways.com/7 fun facts about jujitsu.
That might be the funniest fact you give every time. It's where the hell you're getting these facts from.
I know. I always got to give a shout out, right? Paul, do you want to? So it takes about 10 years ish to get a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Do you want to guess how many people worldwide have a black belt in jiu-jitsu? I'll give you a hint. It's probably a lot smaller than you're thinking.
Okay. I was going to guess 1 million.
Allegedly, currently 5,000 recognized black belt holders.
Yeah. That seems too low. I mean, I'm
I
not going to say
you.
They're giving them out to everybody, but I think if I was as a kid, right, I remember there being like, I don't know, 10 black belts at my karate gym. Mm-hmm. That was like a random one in Seattle.
Yep.
I guess there might be a difference between recognized, but also your website sounded pretty sketchy, so I don't think they've really to figure it out.
That's probably true. Maybe this is mental gymnastics here, but in my mind, I'm thinking like, well, maybe there's a bunch of dojos that give out their own black belts, but they're not like officially recognized by like a governing organization or something like that.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's what's going on in my head. Anyway, Paul, last one. You were talking about jiu-jitsu earlier, or excuse me, you're talking about fighting earlier, and how like if I'm fighting Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, like I'm not winning that fight. But if I'm fighting someone my own size, then maybe I have a chance. Jiu-jitsu is really interesting because it was developed for people with smaller statures to have a legitimate fighting style. So it is actually really good. The grappling technique on the ground, you're taking a lot of height out of the equation, right? So
yeah, because I'm like, the reach is important.
Exactly, yeah. But then reach is a little less important if you're in a ball on the ground.
I guess so.
Yep. So just to say, jiu-jitsu, very unique fighting style. It's designed that height really shouldn't give you that much of an advantage.
Nice.
Okay, Paul. That's all the fun facts I have for you. Do you want to hit us with any jiu-jitsu resources?
No, I don't have any, but there's probably one near you. But I would think that if you're into martial arts, there's probably a bunch of other options, right? Like Hans was saying Aikido, I was doing karate. Down the street from me, even, there's a Taekwondo. So I think like they're not the same, but I imagine that you get a lot of the same benefit from any of them. So you can't find a jiu-jitsu place. There are other ones.
Yep, look up martial arts in my area. That's all I have too, Paul. So with that said, I think that's as good as time as any. Let's bring Fred on after the break. Welcome back, everyone. Joining us now, we have Paul's friend, Fred Chien, here to talk about his passion of jiu-jitsu. Fred, thanks so much for coming on the pod.
Thanks for having me, you guys. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, thanks so much. We're excited to have you. Fred, just to start, could you give us a little intro background about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Fred. I grew up in Taiwan, which is where I met Paul. And then I came to the States for college. I studied business. I didn't like it. And in the following years after I graduated, I learned coding. I went to a coding boot camp, and now I'm a software developer. And I'm living in New York right now. I live in Brooklyn.
Awesome. Thanks, Fred. Yeah, and so we're here to talk about jiu-jitsu today. So can you give us a little background? How did you originally get into jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, so the real background would be I have two older brothers, and so that's the whole story.
Fend for yourself, right? Yeah.
Yes. So, obviously, I don't know if you guys... I know Paul has a sister. When you're kids and you've got siblings, like you wrestle, you fight over who gets a bigger piece of cake, and who has to sleep on the bunk bed. And it wasn't actually really until summer of 2020, during COVID, all of us were back in town, and my oldest brother Justin was like, "Hey, you should come do jiu-jitsu with me." So he took me to a couple classes, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was probably the most tiring physical exercise I've ever done, because I didn't do sports. I lifted weights. I was on a bulk, so I was about 215 pounds when I took my first jiu-jitsu class. But yeah, no, it was sick. He basically just took me to my first class in Taiwan during COVID, and then a year after that, I decided to sign up for a membership on my own and start going, 2-3 times a week. When I first started back in 2020, I was lifting weights 6 days a week. I was on this push pull legs routine, and so I was like, this is fun, and this is fun, and I can see myself doing this, but I don't really have the space in my schedule for this right now. And then a year later, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna switch 3 days lifting, 3 days jiu-jitsu.
So what was it kind of about that like original class that got you so interested in it? Like, was it just really fun? Did it feel like good exercise, or like what made you come back after that?
So definitely, I think if it wasn't Justin taking me to my first class, I'm a pretty risk averse person. I'm not the type to go and be adventurous and get out of my comfort zone all the time. But it's something that he had already been doing for probably 2-3 years, and it's like something that he does. It's one of his primary modes of exercise. So when he took me, it's just kind of like brother bonding time. So that was one thing I enjoyed about it. And then another thing too was I walked in kind of like to be honest, I kind of walked in with an ego. I was like, you know what,
okay.
I could squat,
okay.
I could squat X amount, like I could squat the weight of 2 men. I'm heavy, probably heavier than every other person in there, and especially in Taiwan, people tend to be lighter, smaller. Dude, I mean, there were guys in there that were probably could have been not half my weight, but 140 pounds. Like if you're 5'8", 140 pounds, little small guy. Within 30 seconds of starting a roll, on my back, choking me out. Like, it doesn't matter, really.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how strong you are compared to your opponent. If you don't know jiu-jitsu and they do, they will have their way with you. Like, physically, you will be helpless. It's a crazy feeling.
Okay, so Fred, if you could explain to Hans and I the basics of jiu-jitsu, right? I'm not sure either of us have ever had the chance to try it. So if you could kind of give a beginner's explanation of what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like you could there's a lot to be said, a lot more than I think a lot of people think. But to really boil it down, the objective is it's a sport between two people, and the objective is to essentially control the other person and then submit them. So, for example, if you and I were standing in front of each other and we start our, it's called a roll in jiu-jitsu for reasons that you would come to know very quickly.
If I saw it, yeah.
Sure. Generally, you would want to get me onto the ground. You would want to bypass my my 4 limbs, which I use as my kind of defenses, to essentially control me, so I can't, get up, so I can't push you off. And then from there, there's a kind of a whole universe of opportunities for you to cause me to submit. There's pain compliance, which typically comes in the form of joint locks. So you would attack my shoulder joint, my elbow, my wrist. You could attack my knee, my ankle. There's also chokes. So you could constrict my windpipe, constrict my arteries, from behind, from on top, from the side. Like I said, it's a whole universe, but it comes down to you want to submit me, and you do that via joint locks and chokes. Yeah, that's kind of the most high level I can think of.
Fred, can I go on a tangent really quick?
Yeah.
I was curious about, you're talking about attacking different joints. What's the injury rate of jiu-jitsu? Have you seen coming out of that? Or do people come up with messed up shoulders and elbows and wrists?
That's a good question. That's a great question. I don't know what the statistics are, but I can speak to, I guess I can really only speak to my own experience. So I've been training for about 3 years, and in that time I've sustained the worst injuries that I've sustained have been one on my, or maybe 1 or 2 on my right ankle. There was a pop in one of the ligaments of my right ankle, and that caused it to feel a little loose and unstable, and obviously it was painful. That, I think, essentially within 4 to 6 weeks was feeling back to more or less 95% strength. And then I've also had some arm bars cranked on me, which attacks your elbow joint, and that I think that was also resolved within a month or so. So personally, in 3 years, only minor injuries, knock on wood.
Gotcha. Yep, that sounds like, well, I mean, in general, in adult sports, in recreation, I feel like that kind of injury rate is actually pretty good. So it sounds to me like there's like safe but effective ways to actually attack these joints where you're not actually damaging your opponent.
Definitely. Yeah, that's really the name of the game, in my opinion. I mean, because, I hear about my friends who played basketball and soccer, and, you might get hit by like a stray elbow. I had a friend get a concussion while he was playing basketball, like pickup ball. And I had a friend tear his MCL or one of the ligaments in the knee while playing soccer. I think maybe somebody slide tackled him. So obviously it's interesting, right? Because the objective of those sports is not to hurt your opponent or even your teammates, but it happens. Whereas the objective of jiu-jitsu is to simulate the injury of your opponent.
So, Fred, the way that you were describing it, at least to me, sounded kind of like, I don't want to say aggressive, but just more physical than I guess I was imagining. Like, I don't know if I've seen jiu-jitsu in the Olympics, but I've watched like different versions of like martial arts competition in the Olympics only. Would you say that it is like somewhat of a physical, contact heavy, obviously it's contact heavy, but demanding contact heavy sport? Or is the intent to submit and then you kind of know the other person's limit where you're not going to break their arm, but like you're in a position where like if you wanted to, you probably could apply enough pressure, but it's kind of like a gentleman's thing?
I would say the gentleman's thing is definitely a thing. It has a nickname. Jiu-jitsu has a nickname, which is the gentle art. It's in Portuguese.
No, Fred, I think you're right, because Hans was saying that that's what jiu-jitsu means in, like, that's the translation from jiu-jitsu in Japanese to English.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. That is what it is. Yeah. Arte suave. That's okay. Yeah. So jiu-jitsu is a Japanese term, and sorry, if I may, I'm gonna go on a really quick like little background exposition. Yeah. So jiu-jitsu was a Japanese martial art form that I think was kind of an offshoot, or maybe like kind of an offshoot of judo, which is an Olympic sport. Judo, the objective is really kind of start from standing, slam your opponent to the ground. If you can slam your opponent to the ground definitively, you win. That's judo. They also have joint locks, they also have chokes, but it's not the objective. The objective is to slam your opponent through the ground. So jiu-jitsu kind of evolved in Japan. And then at some point, they brought it over to Brazil. This guy, whose name was Mitsuyo Maeda, I think, brought it to Brazil in the, 1900s. He taught it to some Brazilians there, one of whom was from the Gracie family. They're a big name now in the sport. And so that's where they kind of took it and made it their own, and it evolved from there. And so that's why it's called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So arte suave, the gentle art. But yeah, it's sort of you could think of it as being descended from judo. But sorry, what was your question again?
I was just talking about, is there kind of like a gentleman's aspect of it, right? Like the way that you're describing is a lot of like choke holds and like things that like sounds like they're gonna like dislocate your shoulder. But obviously you probably aren't doing that to each other, right? How does that manifest? So
for me personally, and for the gym that I go to, and I would say in the ideal situation, you train with the understanding that you and your training partner are training partners and not opponents. You, at the end of the day, are friends. You have other things going on outside of jiu-jitsu. You have jobs to go back to, families. So you don't want to get injured, and your training partner doesn't want to get injured. So you also, to make that kind of training environment work, everybody kind of has to be on the same page about not wanting to injure each other. There are gyms I know that exist where they go hard, like they go hard as hell because they're prepping for competition. They want to be the best in the world, and when you're competing, when you're on stage, Typically, you put aside those reservations. If you have to break your opponent, you will, because if they have to break you, they will. And you're trying to get the gold medal and you're trying to get the cash prize. But in the training room, you're all partners. You're all paying the membership. You're all working adults. There is absolutely like a gentleman's agreement. You don't rip on joint locks. You don't try to injure you. And all this has been dancing around really like the core thing that I forgot to mention in my high level kind of explanation earlier, which is the tap. So that's really what makes all this work. The tap is what you do when you feel in danger or you cannot continue. It essentially means I concede, I yield, you win. So you do that when somebody's sinking in a choke on you. You do that when somebody's got your arm and they're about to extend it. You tap and then they let go. It's pretty safe. It is sacred. If somebody doesn't respect the tap, they don't have any place training this martial art. Yeah, so that's it. When you tap it, it basically means I withdraw from this match. You win, and they also withdraw consent to be doing this combat with you. So in my opinion, like I don't know what the law says, but like once you tap, like you basically, your opponent is obligated to stop whatever it was that they were doing.
Yeah, that's your white flag.
Yeah, exactly. So that has to be respected. And so with that though, it also means that the responsibility to keep your joints safe and healthy is really 50% or more on you. So for me, like if my ankle got popped, it's because somebody had it in an ankle lock and I didn't tap soon enough.
Because you know the limits of your own body, right? Like your limits are probably different than mine. And
yes, different people have different. The shoulder joint is actually a really good example of this. Some people have really, really flexible shoulders. So if you put a shoulder joint attack on them, let's say, for example, a Kimura, for some people, you can bring their elbow and their wrist pretty far behind their torso and they'll feel fine. Once it's back there, there's really kind of, that's beyond the point of no return. So it would be in everyone's best interests to tap. But there are also people for whom you snatch up that grip and it barely even passes behind them and they have to tap because their shoulders just don't have that mobility. So I will say it's not something that like the average person, especially like a new practitioner, would really know. You don't just intrinsically know the limits of, let's say, your ankle. Sometimes you just kind of find out the hard way, which is how it was for me.
Fair enough.
No. Fred, I kind of wanted to dive into the training aspect of jiu-jitsu. Mainly being, I know in a lot of different martial arts, there's like kind of a progression system, right? Like you start as like a white belt and then you get yellow belt, orange belt. Is that the same with jiu-jitsu? Or how do you know like what level of jiu-jitsu you are at?
Yeah, definitely. So because it descends from judo, I'm actually not 100% sure on what the judo belts are. But yeah, like in karate, you start at a white belt. Judo, you start as a white belt. Same with jiu-jitsu. So day one, you put on a white belt. It goes white, then blue, then purple, then brown, then black. So
okay.
Typically to get a blue belt, you'd have to be training, let's say, 3 to 4 times a week on average across, and of course it's subjective. The coach really is the one, your head coach is the one who decides, but it could take you between 2 and 3 years to get the blue belt. And then I think the generally like kind of number that I've heard in terms of from day one until you get your black belt, it could take 10 years, it could take 12, it could take 20. But 10 is like, you could shoot for getting a black belt in 10 years.
So what are you at right now, Fred?
I'm a blue belt. Yeah, I got promoted last year. I've been a blue belt. It's been cool. It feels, it's an amazing feeling because dude, it's hard. Like jiu-jitsu is a pretty challenging thing, especially if you're not already used to other martial arts or even just doing sports. But it's accessible, in my opinion. I think that anyone can do it. It's not for everyone, but anyone can do it. It's kind of like Ratatouille. Not everyone can be a great chef, but a great chef can come from anywhere or something like that.
beautiful.
Oh, one of the best analogies I've ever heard right there. That's awesome. Wait, so Fred, I want to know, when you went from white belt to blue belt, was there like a test, or like did you have to demonstrate certain techniques or win at a competition or something like that? Or how do you know you like now is the time I get to step up to the next level?
Yeah. Well, so depending on what gym you're at and who the coach is, and let's say how traditional they are, if your coach is from Brazilian group, like trained in Brazil, they're very much more traditional, more old fashioned.
Mm-hmm.
So there may be like a testing element to it. There may be like let's say twice a year there may be a promotion day, and so if you miss that promotion, you might not get your belt. But everybody is encouraged to go, show up, and then the people who are in line to get promoted, as the coach deems it, will receive their belts. There may be a ceremony called a Shark Tank, which is like when you get promoted, you basically sit on the mat, and everybody who's there present that day lines up and rolls with you. So normally
That's awesome.
You roll a 5-minute round.
Wow.
You're both pretty tired, right? You roll a 5-minute round, and then the next guy comes in. He's fresh, and he rolls a 5-minute round, and then the next guy. So you get beat up. I've never done it, but I can imagine it's it would basically be like a endurance kind of a marathon sort of thing, and you would definitely, I think, get destroyed, because I think they usually do it in order from the lowest belt to the highest belt. So you're already exhausted by the time the black belts in the class are, there's little ceremonies, traditions. For my gym here in New York, I train at a gym called Master Skya in Chinatown under a black belt called Alex, and he's great. He's not as traditional. He doesn't do promotion days. He doesn't do testing. There's no gauntlet, which is where after you get promoted, you walk through and everybody beats you with a belt. That's like an old Brazilian tradition, and it's
wow. Okay.
it's a bit much for me, in my opinion. I'm glad we don't do it, but some people like it. And he basically just keeps an eye on everybody and keeps track of, this person's been coming consistently. They've been demonstrating improvement in their skill. They've been working on their technique rather than relying on their attributes like strength or speed or whatever. And yeah, he basically just kind of goes by, I think he just goes by feel. And when your time comes after class, when everybody's going through the debrief, he'll say, and listen, he'll give a little speech and pull out a belt out of nowhere and just say, hey, come on up.
Oh, so it's kind of like a little surprise for you.
Oh,
yeah,
that's cool.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And quick story. So Darren and I trained together at this gym. He's the one who actually signed up for this gym first.
Darren's Fred's older brother.
Darren's my older brother. He's in between me and Justin. I had trained for about 8 months before he did. He was in the same place as me. I could do this. This would be cool, but I'm too busy. I'm working out too. I have, no space in my schedule. And then one day he made space and he signed up and he loved it. So we trained at the same gym together for over a year, probably a year and a half. I think he actually got his blue belt, in my opinion, pretty quick, because he had gone so much. He went 5-6 classes a week. I was only doing 2 to 3. So he also caught up to me pretty quickly in skill. I would say we're pretty evenly matched now. I mean, I can, come on, I can still,
Right.
I mean, let's say he's not too far behind me. Let's just say that.
Okay.
But it was really, he actually had to move to San Francisco. He was really, really everybody at the gym loved him. So it was sad to see him go, but in the weeks before he had to move, before he left, after class one day, Alex started giving his little speech, and he pulled out 2 blue belts, and he's like, come on up, Fred and Darren, and we both got promoted together, and I think that was a really, really cool experience.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
But he handed you yours first, right?
I don't remember. Yeah, well, so it was him and also the other head coach. So I think then they handed it to us at the same time. But yeah,
some equality there.
Okay. Fred, I also wanted another aspect of jiu-jitsu that I wanted to learn more about was the competition aspect. So kind of like, I want to know more about, do you enter like tournaments, or what does those like actual competitions kind of look like?
Yeah, so there's levels of competitions that go from kind of like local neighborhood to sort of, let's say, like statewide grappling events to like country to worlds. So there's also different organizations that put on tournaments. Let me just start also by saying I have never actually competed. I've never really had the desire to. Both my brothers have, and I've gone to support Darren and kind of coach him and film him. And he actually did really well. He got a silver in his most recent tournament.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. I've never really wanted to do it. I think just, I never had that desire. So I've never done it. But it's there's a lot of, at least here in New York, there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of tournaments. So a lot of the guys at my gym do compete, and they train hard, especially in the kind of months leading up to a tournament, big or small. They'll step up the training, frequency, intensity. We'll give them good roles so that they can get their conditioning and their technique really dialed in.
So maybe Fred, maybe just in terms of like a bout or whatever you want to call it, like a roll.
Yeah.
Is it point based, or is it just like if you tap out once, like you lose?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. That's actually that's a great question. Thank you. So in a tournament, it's essentially a pretty typical like bracket style. You would basically face off against your opponent, and you get, at least for the ones that I've witnessed, you get one match with each opponent. And if it ends in a submission, then the person who did the submitting wins immediately, and moves on. If there's a tap that happens, it's over. The winner moves on, and the loser does not. There's also a point system that I probably won't get too in depth on, but essentially you get points for taking down your opponent, and the referee decides like if it's a valid takedown or if your opponent willingly sat down. But if you are both standing and you cause your opponent to end up on the ground, let's say via a double leg takedown, single leg takedown, leg sweep or foot sweep, you would get points for that. If you're standing and your opponent is on their back in what's called guard, your objective would then to be to get around their legs, either get between their legs and kind of step through them, or to totally sidestep and bypass their legs, because the legs is the first line of defense in the guard situation. You get points for passing guard. You get points for holding dominant positions on your opponent that they can't get out of. So it takes 3 seconds if you, let's say your opponent is on the ground and you are able to mount them. Basically, you are straddling their torso with your legs. That, I think, is worth 4 points. So I don't know if you noticed, but I've been hesitant to say the point values for any of these actions because I don't really know them.
So, but basically, in a roll, you're earning points, and if you don't submit, it's kind of like a boxing fight, right? Like whoever has the most points wins.
Exactly.
That
yes.
round.
Yes, that's a great analogy.
Is calling it a roll or a bout? Are those appropriate terminology?
Oh yeah, no.
Or a match?
I think, let's say if you're in a competition, it would be called a match. And I think actually at the highest levels they might even do like 3 rounds. So in a match you might have 3 rounds, and then don't quote me on that. And then in just training, in the gym, you would just call it rolling. You would just call it a roll. Yeah. Okay. Bout is like a boxing term.
Okay.
Right?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's on me.
No.
I said it.
I definitely
I was just
said
trying
it
to
too, so.
Some familiarity in it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, it's like there's so much lingo, right, in climbing. I hate the I'm just gonna flash this on site, but can you give me the beta first, and make sure it's just, I'm not gonna be like the gatekeeper of lingo,
Yeah.
If we both know what we're saying, then
we're good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then, do you, Fred, have any like particular memory of like a specific role or match, like something that like a very memorable one, and like what made it so memorable?
Yeah. So
just curious. Yeah.
So I mentioned that I started jiu-jitsu before Darren. So Justin got me into it. and then we both got Darren into it. I'm the youngest of the three brothers, and I had to share a room with Darren the most growing up. And Justin always kind of had like a little bit of like a loftiness. He's the oldest, so, and then it was us two kind of
Sure.
wrestling with each other. So growing up, there are several videos that exist that float around that Darren loves to share once in a while of him and I wrestling at Justin's encouragement. Darren and I wrestling.
Okay.
And I think in all of them, he's pretty much dominating me. He just has that dog in him. Both of us with no training. I mean, it doesn't matter if I weigh more than him. He's still kind of like ragdolling me. So he just is naturally, I think he's just a dog. I'm not, you can probably tell by looking at me. But when I started training, I was so consistent. My schedule was Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I would train. And I did that for about 8 months when we all flew back to Taiwan and for another family get-together. So I had 8 months of training. Darren had 0. And we're on the beach with our family and also another family that we were traveling with. And I don't know how it comes up, but I remember I was looking forward to this day for 8 months. That was really kind of my goal was to submit Darren. Like I was like Rocky Balboa training to defeat Darren. And then it comes down to it on the beach. We start tussling. Everybody's watching. There's two camera angle. There's 2 pieces of footage from different angles at the same time of this bout, and it ends up with me choking Darren out with a pretty crappy guillotine. So I definitely didn't perform well, but I mean, come on, I'm an 8-month white belt, but I got him. Ladies and gentlemen, I got him. And I would say that was, I think, like really the most, that was for me, like that's like winning the gold medal. Like I could retire after that.
It's just so important to be able to one up your siblings.
Exactly.
The ultimate motivator.
Exactly.
Yes.
I mean, you get competitive. And so I'm sure that was his like origin story, or I'm sure that factored into his origin story. So he's actually, I think I would say right now, he's probably the most like passionate about jiu-jitsu out of the 3 of us. Yeah.
Just so when you guys see each other again.
Yeah. So almost every time we all meet up again, we're gonna roll with each other. We're gonna train with each other. We're gonna spontaneous. Like we'll go to a gym, we'll go to a mat, and maybe we'll pay to book a session where we can just use the mat, or we'll just find some grass and just go at it.
When there's no mat available, just need some grass. Huh?
Some grass or a beach, not concrete, but
preferably not concrete yet. I tangent, but I'm also a younger brother, Fred, and I same experience where I'd get in fights with my brother and I would never win. Like he would just always outstrength me for sure. So my strategy was whenever I was really mad at my brother, I would wind up, take a really big swing at him, get one good lick in, and then run to mom. Mom, help!
That's a time-honored younger brother stratagem.
Yeah. Exactly. But hearing your story about your personal gold medal here, it's kind of inspiring me to pick up jiu-jitsu. And then I'll come over to my brother's house and be like, all right, let's do this. I'm ready now.
Look, I mean, I don't care if he's bigger than you. I don't care if he's stronger than you still. If you train jiu-jitsu, if you get 6 good months of training, 6 or more good months of training, next time you meet him at a family gathering, you can, I've been training a little bit.
Can you imagine? Hans doesn't mention it at all. Just completely just submits his brother.
Yes.
And everyone's like, Hans, we're eating dinner. What are you doing?
That is actually how it always goes. My parents hate they like to see us wrestle. They don't like to see us submit each other. They hate that.
Yep.
Like, can you not make him pass out?
How can I slyly slip it into conversation? Like, hey, should we wrestle?
Like, I brought a mat. It's
that's so interesting. I have a
I mean, if you got
bag,
some carpet, you could just be like, look, hey, oh man, maybe it'll come up. Maybe it'll be like, oh, you know how you used to always kick my ass, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't know if you still got it in you. You're getting old, man. I've got.
That's it. Yeah, I gotta antagonize him a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah.
And don't mention that you trained. Yeah.
That's right. Yep, that's the key point there.
It's Sun Tzu's Art of War. When you are weak, appear strong, and when you are strong, appear weak.
God, he's good with the quotes.
Yeah, for real. Fred giving some incredible analogies and advice here.
I was up all morning. I was like best quotes, like quotes to make you look smart.
So Fred, in terms of like the physicality of the sport, right? We're talking about being able to beat up your older brothers who maybe not anymore. We're big, they're not bigger than you anymore. But what kind of like advantages or like topics would you talk about in terms of like strength conditioning, or does like size help in jiu-jitsu? Like how does that factor in?
Definitely, yes. So there's kind of this like marketing slogan built up around jiu-jitsu primarily by the Gracie family, which is like it's the martial art that lets the smaller person beat up the bigger person, that lets the weaker person beat up the stronger person. And it is true to an extent. Because like I said, when I walked into the gym my first day, I was 215 pounds. I outweighed everybody. I could out squat everybody. Whatever. I got tapped by everybody. Genuinely, even the white belts, even like the less than 1 year white belts, they were beating me up. It's at the end of the day, it's a combat sport, so strength is going to be important. Coordination is going to be very important, and skill is actually going to be the most important, in my opinion. So there's kind of like a folk knowledge that I see on the Jiu-Jitsu subreddit, which is every belt level is about equivalent to 10 pounds of body weight, or 10 or 20 pounds of body weight, or 10 years of age. So what that means is if you are let's say if you are a 25-year-old blue belt, you might have a pretty even match with like a 25-year-old purple belt that you outweigh by 20 pounds. The 20 pounds versus the extra belt worth of experience, that might cancel out. The purple belt I would still probably put a little bit more money on. But yeah, that all that is to say, like, the skill isn't everything, which is what you might think if you had heard kind of the marketing around jiu-jitsu. Skill is not everything. You need. Oh, I didn't even mention conditioning when I was listing out the things that are important. When you take your first class and you have your first roll, 5 minute. It's a 5-minute roll. That's the standard. After a minute and a half, you will probably feel more gassed than, for me, more gassed than I've ever felt. But it'll feel like you just tried to sprint for 30 minutes, because that's probably what you did. You probably expended too much energy in the first minute and a half, whereas your opponent is conserving energy, cooking you. Cooking is essentially where you are kind of resting and you're making your opponent carry your weight, and you're saving your energy and kind of putting them in uncomfortable positions where they're forced to expend their energy. And it's a part of the kind of the strategic part of jiu-jitsu. So yeah, so there's that physical part of it. There's actually also, I mean, I kind of touched on the strategy. There's a mental game to it too, in the sense that, not in the sense that you're like trying to get in your opponent's head and psych them out ahead of a tournament. Like, that's a thing. But people have also described it as being like a physical chess. Like, if we're locked up in a guard, let's say, I have objectives and you have objectives. I'm going to try to go for this arm. You don't want me to do that. You want me to do this. I want you to do this. So we're basically going to try to, there's a lot of push and pull that goes on. There's a lot of kind of decision making that needs to happen. There's a lot of there's a little bit of trickery. There's a lot of kind of taking advantage of opportunities as they present themselves. So there's definitely like a pretty cognitive part of the sport where you need to be coming up with strategies. You need to be adapting on the fly. So yeah, like, it's very holistic in my opinion. You can't be just totally being a meathead in the gym without any technique. It's not cool. Like, people aren't going to like you, but it also is not a sustainable approach to training long term, because you are going to meet somebody who either is stronger than you or whose technique will nullify your strength. I mean, there's levels to it. When I roll with a black belt who's, half my size, I can't do anything. I can't get anything going because they already know everything that I could possibly think of. They know things that I don't. They know traps. They know what you're going to do, and they're going to make you. They know what you're going to do, and then they know how to punish you for it.
Yeah.
And you're just not going to be able to get anything going. It doesn't matter how.
It's like the chess. They're setting the gambit, right? They're baiting you, setting the trap, and then they know, a step ahead of whatever you're at. So
exactly, yeah. So they'll let you think, oh, okay, yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm surviving. And then, 3 moves ago you messed up, and now you're just now finding out.
Fred, is there any other aspects of jiu-jitsu that's like not very common knowledge that you'd want the people to know about?
Yeah, okay, so there's like the common kind of jokes about jiu-jitsu are like, oh, it's cuddling with sweaty men, you and a bunch of guys are in pajamas and you're like wrestling and hugging each other. And like, yeah, that's totally what it is. But it's actually a lot more to it than that,
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
I touched on a little bit of the strategic element to it. It's highly, I wrote this down, systematized, which is a word.
It is. You looked that up?
Well, the Google Doc is not putting a little red squiggly under it. So, but there's really there's a rhyme or reason to the kind of wrestling, like the rolling around, the chaos. To the uninitiated, if you're watching a UFC fight or even if you're watching a BJJ match, it can look like a lot of chaos and flailing, but there's actually very defined positions that the two people can be in. There's a lot of configurations. They all have names. There's different strategies. There's different options from every position. So yeah, it's actually a lot more organized, I would say, than it looks. It definitely is like, haha, sweaty guys cuddling pajamas. But beyond, it goes deep. There's actually, I mean, it takes 10 years to get your black belt. There's that much cognitive knowledge beyond, not even speaking of the physical aspect of getting your reps in to learn these moves that are not intuitive, to be able to move in a certain way. I mean, I'm not a very graceful guy. I'm kind of lanky and awkward, but doing jiu-jitsu has really helped me kind of move through the world more in a more coordinated way. When I get out of bed in the morning, I shrimp. I use jiu-jitsu techniques. I'll scoot my hips out, and I'll if I'm getting up off the floor, there's a way to do that. Like there's a way to do that in a way that's stable, strong, and if hypothetically somebody were in front of you trying to attack you, you'd be able to. It's called a technical stand-up. It's not just standing up.
Okay. It's technical.
It's technical.
Okay.
That's maybe what I would want people to know that isn't common knowledge. It's very technical. It's also safer than you think. We talked about this a little before as well, in terms of like what I think the injury rate would be. And in my opinion, if you are in a gym that has a good culture that filters out people who come in with the intent to maim and injure, or people who have a chip on their shoulder, which I would say is probably most gyms, because it's bad for business if you have somebody in there tearing up shoulders, tearing up joints. It's bad for business. People aren't going to want to train there. It's so if you're in a good environment, which I think hopefully the majority of gyms are, and you yourself keep your kind of ego in check and don't let your limbs go past their limit. If you tap early and tap often, that's the slogan. You're gonna make it pretty far. I mean, this is a sport that people can do into their 50s, 60s. There's 70-year-olds and 80-year-olds that still train. They can't move probably like they used to, but people can train jiu-jitsu. There's a way to do it in a way that is essentially as safe as putting on your pants.
I'll throw on my back doing that.
Well, you're probably not doing it right.
I'm not doing it the technical way.
You're not
technical put on
you
your
gotta
pants.
do a technical pants put on, okay? You can't just do a pants put on.
Right. My bad. Fred, do you have any like funny terms for any grapples or whatever you're talking about? Like, are there any like particularly interesting ones?
That's a good question. There's a school of jiu-jitsu that is a little bit on the fringe. They're kind of considered like the stoners of jiu-jitsu. It's called 10th Planet, and they're a system. They're like kind of an affiliation, or let's say like they're a network of gyms headed by this guy called Eddie Bravo, and he likes to do psychedelics. Probably he kind of came up with a lot of like really weird and out there moves that are very much not what the Brazilians and the Japanese like came up with. But they all have really fun names. So okay, there's the electric chair submission, and that is, as I understand it, because I don't know it, that is where you somehow maneuver your way into getting your opponent's legs, and you're essentially forcing them to do the splits. So that's a pretty rare submission. It's not your bread and butter, right? Most of the time you're doing strangles, you're doing elbow locks, you're doing elbows, shoulders, but splitting the hips is a pretty it'll take some doing, and that's called the electric chair.
I'm just trying to imagine how that would even happen.
Yeah, I honestly don't know what the sequence would be. There's the buggy choke, which I don't know why it's called that, but it's actually kind of interesting. And it's a little bit, what's the word, where it's like non-standard.
Unorthodox?
It's a little unorthodox. Yes, thank you, Hans. That's a good word. It's a little unorthodox where you can hit the submission from the bottom position, which is generally you want to be on top because then you have more options. But it's where you choke somebody using essentially your lat and using the side of your torso. Basically, you can kind of loop your arm under there and imagine your head is here and your head and your shoulder are poking out through here.
It does not seem like a comfortable position.
It's not comfortable to do either. I mean, I saw a video of a US soldier breaking his own shin doing it.
Oh jeez, okay.
So again, on the whole safety
these
thing,
are unorthodox.
like freak accidents also happen. But yeah, so there's, I mean, I'll send you a list. I can send you a list after this. But there's some crazy names: Stoner Control, the Somp, the Super Stomp, and the New Stomp. I don't even know what these things are. The Zombie, the Night of the Living Dead, Kung Fu Move to Jew Claw, Go-Go Plata, Loco Plata, Omo Plata.
And those are all just one.
So that actually I can explain. The Omo yeah, did you see that crazy tournament where he hit the Go-Go Plata, Loco Plata, Omo Plata on that guy? Shit was crazy. Omo Plata is just Portuguese for shoulder blade. And it's where it's a shoulder lock that you perform using your legs. So that I don't know how to begin to describe to you, but that is actually a move I know. That's a move that they actually teach new white belts. It's a traditional one. It's pretty cool. It's very cool.
So Fred, I gotta ask you, obviously this podcast is about diving into a new hobby, new passion every week. So what's the elevator pitch for why we should pick up jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, do you have an older brother and and did you spend your entire childhood getting bullied by said older brother? If so, jiu-jitsu may be for you. Or if you want to train a martial art or really do any sport, if you want to do a sport but you don't want to get concussions, jiu-jitsu is pretty good for that. You might get kneed in the face a little bit, but it's not the point of the sport like boxing is. You're not going to be taking sustained and repeated blows to the head. Boxing, football, you don't want to develop CTE. Jiu-jitsu is good for that. There's no striking involved. It's all grappling.
That's perfect. So all the younger brothers out there, listen up. Now is your time.
It's the revolt.
Younger brothers rise up.
All right, Fred, do you have any plugs, either personal or any pieces of media you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, well, shout out to This Week I'm Into podcast.
Oh, thank you. Plugging the podcast on the podcast.
What good outreach.
Cause a short circuit. And of course, shout out to my brothers for being my brothers and all that entails. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Fred, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, best of luck in your next match with your brothers. I hope we get to see that footage here soon.
Thank you. Yes, I'll send it to you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Fred. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the This Week I'm Into podcast, and a huge thank you to Fred Chien for sharing his passion on Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future topics, please reach out at thisweekiminto@gmail.com and give us a follow on Instagram at thisweekiminto. Please rate us 5 stars and share this episode with a friend. We're doing our best to grow the podcast, and your help really goes a long way. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next one. All right, Paul, you ready? I've been meaning to try Brazilian Jiu Jitsu for ages.
Same here. They say it's all about leverage and technique, not brute strength.
Oh yeah, totally. And you know, smoothness.
Smoothness?
Yeah, man. The whole Brazilian thing. No hair, no friction, nowhere for an opponent to grab. I got a full Brazilian this morning just to prepare.
Wait, what?
Yeah, stripped it clean. Front, back, everything. I figured if I was going to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I should dive in, right? That's what you always say.
Hans, buddy, I think you misunderstood.
Misunderstood what? Are we doing a different kind of Jiu-Jitsu? Did I endure all this pain for nothing? I assumed I'd get an edge with no hair. I even greased up a bit for maximum slickness.
No one here is waxed or greased. It's not about being hairless. It's about grappling, technique, chokes, joint locks.
Wait, Paul, so you're saying I just waxed my entire body for nothing?
I mean, you might look good, and at least you'll be aerodynamic.
Oh, great. So when they throw me across the mat, I'll at least pick up some speed?
Well, are you at least going to be ready to roll?
I'm rethinking this, and maybe not. I'm still sore from my training.
Oh, man.